Hi there. In this lecture we see Magnus Carlsen playing against Wesley in the 2019 Sinquefield Cup. So this is a pretty serious tournament, 1 day time control. Let's have a look. So Magnus uses the Italian game, so the white pieces bishop c4 as a preference to the Royal Pairs. So okay, well the Spanish game, so bishop c4, we have bishop c5 from Wesley Magnus Carlsen's knight f6, d3. So this is the quieter version, the gioco pianissimo, quieter version of the Italian game. So black castles c3, d6, h3. It's not strictly necessary to play h3. If rook e1, it's not a big deal. If bishop g4, we do end up with a small edge here, for example. So anyway, h3 was played, h6, rook e1, a6, a4, a5, knight bd2, bishop e6, and now bishop b5, knight a7. So here, slightly interesting, d4. So an exchange of bishop for bishop happens now after knight takes b5. But there's a structural change as well. Is it weakening black's structure to do this? So, okay, yeah, this is an interesting moment in the game. Knight takes b5, so d takes c5, the knight goes back, b3, we have rook e8, c takes d6, queen takes d6, bishop a3, c5. We have knight c4, so this actually doesn't mind having double pawns. Magnus doesn't mind having double pawns. He kind of marks out the d5 square quite clearly. It's an interesting positional idea here. Queen's come off, and white's got a grip on d5 and b5, and of course this is a backward pawn on b7 that we could target on the b file. So, okay, so it's interesting. We have b6, and this is a great positional maneuver now, kind of a bit like what you'd expect from Botvinnik or something to do with like this structure, because Botvinnik was experimenting with double pawn structures. But to get our knight to d5, there is a potential route here like this, moving to allow g2 and coming like this. That is a route. So knight h4 is played, or ad8, f3. So safeguarding e4 before doing anything else, though that's a priority here. g6, g3. So yeah, this knight route is in progress in a safe manner. We don't want to lose e4 to rook takes and then knight takes. So f3 was absolutely needed as well. Knight h5, king f2, protecting g3, knight c6, bishop c1 targets h6. King moves to protect h6, bishop e3. The bishop, although it seems in one respect passive, it's always threatening bishop takes c5, which could become actual a threat later. A pair of rooks comes off, and you might think, well, this is a bit simplifying, isn't it? We have now rook b8. So at the moment, bishop takes c5 is not possible because the knight on c6 holds b8. That's not a threat at the moment. We have knight g2, knight f6, king e2, knight e8, bishop f2, knight d6, knight e3, knight e7, and now here knight d5. Knight takes d5 is played, which straightens out white's pawns a bit. But if knight c6, we can just take on b6, and this position is in our favor with c5 under fire. So that bishop on f2 is all of a sudden pretty dangerous. So this is a big advantage for white. So knight takes d5, c takes d5, rook b7, king d3. And now here, in fact, you could argue this is not really helping black at all. This next move, it's very committal, and it basically creates a losing structure, but it's a difficult position for black. Maybe it is actually a very difficult position here for black, because one pawn is kind of tying down two here, and that statistic in itself is a bit of a win, because actually white could be threatening now f4 to get a majority of pawns in the center and, you know, big pass pawn potential. So in fact, yeah, f5 looks like a weakening move, but it is actually difficult. If black doesn't play f5, white is potentially threatening f4. Actually, just for the record, let's be extremely concrete. Let's say h5 is played. Do we want to play f4 immediately? This is fairly effective to play f4 immediately, but there is a resource c4 check. If we played f4 immediately, c4 check, we are better here because we're undermining a5. This is an example, but we don't actually even need this hustle. We can actually do a little bit better with c4 first, just to prevent that resource and still keep this f4, you know, attack in mind. So here f6, now f4, and it's actually a cleaner kind of way of playing it. So the bishop can now come to c3, and yeah, as soon as the knight moves, we're going to take on a5. But otherwise, yeah, coming to c3 is going to be absolutely, you know, any king f6, rook f1 check, it's going to be devastating. So what is black doing? Offering a5. This is not going to help either. We're going to take out e5. So that's actually a very concrete method. As an example, we might start with c4 here to make sure c4 check isn't a resource after f4. Our king's nicely protecting c4 and e4 here, but it is exposed to c4 check as a resource. Okay, so anyway, f5 was played by Wesley So here, but it's a difficult position now. It really is, because after c4, can you see that the bishop actually has got not just c5 but what else? There's another target in the position now. Even though the knight's kind of seemingly quite useful putting pressure on e4, making sure f4 is out of the question, downside is of black's f5, e5. And actually, we're going to see that e5, it's a huge problem here, so much so, I keep saying so, I know it's Wesley So, but the big positional threat now is bishop e1 to c3. And if the knight moved, then we'd have bishop takes a5, because the knight has to protect b7. And actually, Wesley So acts quickly now with rook f7, offering b6. It's all going downhill. So the problem is, if king f7, bishop e1, not with the threat of bishop takes a5 because the knight holds b7, but just putting the bishop on c3 and then check, we'll just, that's end of game basically. There's two connected pass pawns in the center, crushing. So rook f7, we have rook takes b6, hitting the knight, not worrying about the bishop, and this has undermined the structure, so these two pawns are weak now. So here, after the check, king e2, rook c3, rook e6, and this is an advantageous rook and pawn endgame. Check, d6, and this actually ends the game here. Yeah, not much to play out, in fact. If rook a2 check, king d3, rook a4, e5 check, the pawns are really coming down, and here it looks as though, well, maybe black's holding it, not really. Check, rook f7, and then this pawn is going to come down. It's absolutely decisive. These two pawns are absolutely decisive with the big e7 threat. It's absolutely winning. So yes, it's an interesting, absolutely, it looks, if f5 is basically forced, black is in huge trouble, but there does seem to be a huge threat of f4. So what can black actually do? Black is standing significantly worse here. It looks as though, things are only going to get worse for black in any case in this position. So yes, it's interesting that, this e5 becomes a target. It's not easy to see here because there's a pawn on c3. The exploitability of that seems a bit low, but actually it's not that low. Once c4 is played and the bishop can reroute to hit e5, this has been a positional masterclass game in effect. So this is actually, it's a very, very bad position for black indeed here because of that e5 liability. When transitioning into endgames, especially if You know, we have a bishop with juicy targets. Yeah, the bishop's actually superior to the knight. Even though the knight seems to have an ideal blockade square, it's actually not enough here. It's fine positional judgment combined with calculations to show what is actually exploitable or not. But e5, yeah, it does seem like a major weakness, which is not giving black an easy time at all here. Okay, thanks very much. Hi there. I hope you enjoyed that game sample. It's actually from my course, which you can find at the Kingscrusher TV page, which has great discounts. It's the Italian game Mastery, the Ideal Beginner's Opening. So just very briefly, if we click there, you can also see other free sample videos. Just do expand all sections, and you can see these preview links if you want to see other free previews and get an idea of the course yourself. I'm going to keep it short here. Just basically to say I had a fantastic time seeing many brilliant games in the Italian game. You can see from the number of collections how epic some of these games are, that they've been collected like hundreds of times at chessgames.com. And yeah, I really hope you check out this index and may consider getting the course. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.